shadows of invisibility, Prisha Sharma slipped into the back row of the lecture hall, trying to make herself small. The journalism department's guest speaker, editor of the Delhi Chronicle, was already fielding questions, and predictably, Vikram Malhotra commanded the floor. Prisha watched as he gestured confidently, his perfectly tailored blazer catching the light as he spoke about the future of digital media. "What our generation needs is fearless voices," Vikram announced, earning approving nods from professors, people who aren't afraid to stand out. Prisha's notebook was already filled with ideas, questions about investigative ethics, thoughts on protecting sources in the digital age. But when the moderator asked for more questions, her half-raised hand remained invisible among the forest of eager arms. She'd spent 3 years at Ganesh National University cultivating her skills as a writer, maintaining a perfect GPA, and submitting articles to the school paper that were consistently buried on back pages. Meanwhile, Vikram, with his family connections and effortless charm, was granted the prime editorial positions despite his middling writing skills. "Stellar discussion today, Mr. Malhotra," Professor Kumar said as students filed out. "The Chronicle would be lucky to have someone with your presence." Prisha clutched her notebook tighter. The Chronicle internship, her dream since freshman year. She'd already submitted her application with samples of her work, pieces she'd spent months perfecting. "Sharma," a voice called. She turned to find Vikram approaching, his signature half-smile in place. "You're on the paper staff, right? The one who does the... What is it again?" "Investigative pieces," Prisha said quietly. "The series on administrative fund misallocation." Right, he said, clearly not remembering. "Listen, some of us are meeting at Cafe Luminous to discuss internship strategies. You should come," the invitation surprised her. After 3 years of existing in Vikram's periphery, this felt like finally stepping into the light. "I'd like that," she said, hope warming her voice. That evening, Prisha spent extra time getting ready, selecting her most professional blouse and applying a touch of lipstick. She'd admired Vikram from afar, his confidence, his ease in navigating social circles, and yes, his undeniable good looks. But more than that, she'd imagined conversations about journalism ethics, about the stories that mattered. The cafe hummed with evening energy when she arrived. She spotted Vikram at a corner table, surrounded by his usual entourage. When he waved her over, her heart quickened. "Prisha!" "You made it," he said, making room beside him. "We were just talking about the Chronicle applications." For the next hour, she felt almost part of their circle, offering tentative insights that were occasionally acknowledged. When the others excused themselves for cigarettes, she found herself alone with Vikram. "You know," she began carefully, "I've been working on a piece about corporate influence in university research. It might be something the Chronicle would be interested in." "That's nice," Vikram said, checking his phone. "But between us, they're looking for writers with a certain spark, you know? People who stand out." "I think my work stands out," Prisha ventured, courage rising from some unexpected place within her. Vikram looked up, genuinely surprised, then laughed softly. "Look, Prisha, you're a decent writer, but you're just so quiet, so ordinary. The industry needs people who command attention." The words landed like small, precise bullets. Ordinary. The dismissal she'd feared most. "The Chronicle needs substance too," she said, voice barely audible. "Sure, but first you need to get noticed," he replied, standing as his friends returned. "Anyway, good luck with the application. Maybe try the local papers first?" As the group moved to another table, leaving her alone with her cooling tea, Prisha stared at her reflection in the cafe window. Ordinary, unmemorable, invisible. But somewhere beneath the hurt, a small ember began to glow, not of hope exactly, but of something more dangerous, determination. The unexpected mentor. The university newspaper office was quiet on Friday afternoons, exactly why Prisha chose this time to submit her articles. She slipped her latest piece into Professor Kumar's inbox, a well-researched exposé on questionable funding in the science department that would likely be reduced to a paragraph on page 8. Still hiding in the shadows, Ms. Sharma? Prisha startled at the voice. Professor Amara Desai stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her crimson blazer. At 50-something, with silver streaking her dark hair, Professor Desai had a reputation that preceded her. Former war correspondent, Pulitzer nominee, and the most demanding professor in the journalism department. I was just dropping off an article, Prisha explained, already inching toward the exit. I read your piece on administrative fund misallocation, Professor Desai said, blocking her path. Kumar buried it, but it was the only thing worth reading in that issue. Prisha blinked, unsure how to respond to unexpected praise. Follow me, Professor Desai commanded, already walking away. My office. Now. Professor Desai's office was a journalist's archive, walls lined with framed front pages, bookshelves, overflowing with dog-eared volumes, and a desk buried under stacks of newspapers. She gestured Prisha to a chair and extracted Prisha's recent articles from a folder. You have the instincts, Professor Desai said, tapping the papers. But you're writing like someone afraid of her own voice. Tell me why. The directness of the question caught Prisha off guard. I just want to be taken seriously. By hiding? Journalism isn't about being liked, Ms. Sharma. It's about being necessary. For the next 2 hours, Professor Desai dissected Prisha's writing, praising her research methodology, but challenging her reluctance to draw bold conclusions. As dusk fell outside, she handed Prisha a press badge. The governor is speaking at a technology conference tomorrow. The official topic is innovation, but my sources say he's announcing cuts to university research funding. No one's connecting the dots to his donors. I want you to cover it. But the newspaper assignments? Not for that glorified newsletter. For me. Professor Desai slid a business card across the desk. I still consult for the Independent Chronicle. Show me what you can do when you're not trying to disappear. The next morning, Prisha sat in the press section, surrounded by veteran reporters. The governor's speech was polished but predictable until he announced a strategic reallocation of research funds. While other reporters dutifully took notes, Prisha noticed the front row seats occupied by executives from NeoCorp, the same company whose donation had renovated the governor's vacation home, a connection she'd discovered while researching her buried university article. When the Q&A began, Prisha surprised herself by raising her hand. Even more surprisingly, she was called upon. Governor, she said, her voice steadier than she felt, could you address the apparent conflict of interest in cutting funding from renewable energy research while accepting donations from NeoCorp, whose fossil fuel investments would be threatened by such research? A hush fell over the room. The governor's smile froze as cameras swiveled toward Prisha. His stammered non-answer made headlines across 3 states. By Monday, Professor Desai had published Prisha's article in the Independent Chronicle, complete with financial documentation, connecting the governor's campaigns to corporations benefiting from the cuts. The story was picked up nationally. Your first byline in a real newspaper, Professor Desai said, dropping the paper on Prisha's usual library desk. How does it feel? Terrifying, Prisha admitted. The university president called me this morning. To threaten you? To offer me the editor position for the investigative section of the university paper. Professor Desai smiled. And Vikram Malhotra's reaction? Prisha looked up, surprised. How did you... I notice things. It's our job. I also notice you've spent 3 years seeking that boy's approval. Prisha flushed. He didn't say anything. He probably hasn't seen it. He's seen it, Professor Desai said firmly. Everyone has. The question is whether you wrote it for them or for the truth. That evening, scrolling through responses to her article, Prisha saw a notification. Vikram had sent her a message. Impressive work. Didn't think you had it in you. Coffee sometime? 6 weeks ago, those words would have made her heart soar. Now, they left her oddly unmoved. Instead, she opened her laptop and began working on her next lead, a connection between university board members and the companies receiving exclusive campus contracts. As her fingers flew across the keyboard, she realized she hadn't thought about being seen or validated all day. She'd been too busy finding her voice. When Professor Desai called at midnight with a tip about documents being shredded in the administration building, Prisha grabbed her camera without hesitation. For the first time, the story mattered more than who was watching her pursue it. Rising above. 3 years after graduation, Prisha's desk at the Independent Chronicle was cluttered with evidence of a career in rapid ascent. Press badges from international conferences, thank you letters from sources, and framed copies of her most impactful stories. Her series on educational corruption had expanded into an investigation of systemic problems nationwide, earning her a National Journalism Award nomination. Sharma, her editor called across the newsroom. That blockchain finance piece. How close are you? Final edits, Prisha responded, not looking up from her screen. You'll have it within the hour. The Prisha who once shrank in lecture halls was now unrecognizable. Her voice, once so hesitant, had become her most powerful asset, both in her writing and in the confident way she navigated press conferences, asking the questions others avoided. Her phone buzzed with a message from Farhan Nair, a documentary filmmaker she'd met while covering a story on urban housing inequality. Their professional collaboration had evolved into a friendship that surprised her with its ease. He respected her work and challenged her thinking without any underlying agenda. Found something you need to see, his message read, followed by a link to classified documents showing corporate tax havens connected to several prominent politicians. Prisha smiled. Farhan had become her most trusted colleague, their skills complementing each other perfectly. Where she excelled at detailed written investigation, his visual storytelling brought human elements to complex issues. They'd collaborated on 3 major projects, each more successful than the last. Dinner tonight? She texted back. I'll bring the blockchain expose, you bring that footage from the whistleblower interview. It's a date, he replied, adding, professionally speaking, of course. Prisha ignored the small flutter in her chest at his words. Their relationship remained carefully professional, despite occasional moments when his gaze lingered or when their late-night work sessions felt comfortable in a way that exceeded mere collegiality. That evening at Farhan's studio apartment, they spread documents across his dining table while sharing takeout curry. The finance minister's denial doesn't match these records, Prisha said, comparing notes. And look at the transfer dates, exactly 3 days after each policy announcement. Farhan nodded, scrolling through footage on his laptop. I've got his former aide on camera here, though her face is obscured. She confirms the timeline. As they worked, Prisha's phone lit up with a notification. An email from Vikram Malhotra, the first contact in nearly 3 years. Her finger hovered over the message. Something important? Farhan asked, noticing her distraction. Just someone from university, she said, setting the phone aside. Nothing urgent. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Prisha opened the email. Prisha, I've been following your career with interest, Vikram wrote. Quite impressive. I've recently taken over my father's media company, and we're launching a new digital platform. We're looking for established journalists to lead our investigative team, and your name came up. The compensation would be substantial. Perhaps we could discuss over dinner? Vikram attached was a formal offer letter with a salary nearly double her current one. Prisha leaned back, memories washing over her. The cafe conversation. Ordinary. The years spent feeling invisible while Vikram commanded every room. The bitter sting of his dismissal. Her finger hovered over the reply button. The position would mean larger resources, a team under her direction, financial security. It would also mean working for Vikram, the man whose approval she had once desperately craved. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Professor Desai, now her mentor and friend. I just heard about the Veritas Award nomination, Professor Desai said. You're the youngest journalist ever shortlisted. I haven't told anyone yet, Prisha said, surprised. How did you? I'm on the committee, Professor Desai laughed. Recused myself from voting on your category, of course. But I wanted you to know. Your series on educational inequality changed policy in 3 states. That's not just good journalism, Prisha. That's necessary journalism. After they hung up, Prisha returned to Vikram's email. With clarity that surprised her, she composed a brief, professional response declining the offer, citing her commitment to current projects. As she pressed send, she realized something profound. She no longer needed Vikram's validation, or anyone's, really. Somewhere along the way, the quiet girl desperate for attention had transformed into a woman whose work spoke volumes, whether anyone was listening or not. And strangely enough, that's when everyone started paying attention. Full circle, the Veritas Awards ceremony glittered with journalism's elite, network anchors in designer attire, newspaper editors in their finest suits, and digital media pioneers pretending to be unimpressed by the old guard pageantry. Prisha, wearing a midnight blue gown that Professor Desai had insisted upon, felt oddly calm despite being nominated in 2 categories. You're the only nominee not sweating through their formal wear, Farhan whispered beside her. He'd insisted on being her +1, claiming he needed to film her victory speech for posterity. That's because I'm not going to win, she replied pragmatically. I'm up against Hernandez's cartel investigation and Batra's 20-year political corruption series. 10 rupees says you're wrong, Farhan wagered. His camera already positioned for her reaction. Before she could respond, a familiar figure approached their table. Vikram Malhotra, impeccably dressed in a tuxedo that probably cost more than her monthly rent, wore the confident smile she remembered from university, though now it seemed practiced rather than natural. Prisha Sharma, he said warmly, extending his hand. The star of the evening? Hardly, she replied, shaking his hand briefly. But it's nice to see you, Vikram. Congratulations on Malhotra Digital's launch. You could have been part of it, he said, lowering his voice. My offer still stands. Farhan raised an eyebrow but remained silent, watching the interaction with interest. I'm happy where I am, Prisha said simply. At the Independent Chronicle? With limited resources and an aging readership, Vikram chuckled. You've outgrown them, Prisha. You need a platform that matches your talent. There was something desperate beneath his confidence that she wouldn't have noticed years ago. Success had made her not just more assured, but more observant. Is that why you're really here, Vikram? To recruit me? He glanced around before leaning closer. Partially. But also, we're launching a major investigation next month. Corporate environmental violations with government complicity. I need someone with your credibility to front it. My credibility, she repeated, understanding dawning. Not my investigative skills or my writing ability, but my reputation for integrity. Vikram's smile faltered slightly. Don't be like that. It's a compliment. Who's the target? She asked, journalist instincts kicking in. Greencore Industries, he replied. My team has been building the case for months. Prisha exchanged a quick glance with Farhan. Greencore was owned by the Dewan family, chief competitors to Vikram's father in several business ventures. So you want me to be the face of what appears to be a vendetta investigation, she said quietly, lending my credibility to your family feud. It's legitimate journalism, Vikram insisted, color rising in his face. Greencore has violated dozens of regulations. Then publish what you have, she replied. If it's solid reporting, it stands on its own. We need someone the public trusts, he persisted. Someone authentic. The irony nearly made her laugh. You once told me I was too ordinary to succeed in this industry, she said, her voice even. That I didn't stand out enough. Vikram had the grace to look embarrassed. People change, Prisha. I was young and... Ladies and gentlemen, the MC announced, please welcome our presenter for the Investigative Series of the Year Award. This is my category, Prisha said, turning away from Vikram. Excuse me? As the nominees were announced and clips of their work played on the screens around the ballroom, Prisha found herself strangely detached from the outcome. The journey from the invisible girl at university to the journalist she'd become, that was the victory that mattered. When her name was announced as the winner, Farhan's triumphant whoop made her laugh as she made her way to the stage. "Journalism isn't about being seen," she said in her acceptance speech, catching Professor Desai's proud smile in the audience. "It's about seeing clearly and helping others do the same." Later, as they left the ceremony with her award, Vikram approached once more. "Congratulations," he said, handing her his card. "Think about my offer. You'd have complete editorial control." Prisha studied him. The boy who had once dismissed her with casual cruelty now needed her more than she had ever needed him. "You know what the strange thing is, Vikram? I'm still that ordinary girl you dismissed at the cafe. I still prefer research to socializing. I still speak quietly in large groups. I never became extraordinary. I just stopped apologizing for being exactly who I am." She handed his card back. "Good luck with your investigation. If it's legitimate, it deserves to be published, but not by me." As they walked away, Farhan slipped his hand into hers. "For the record," he murmured, "I've never seen anything ordinary about you." And for once, Prisha allowed herself to believe it might be true. Her own light morning light streamed through the windows of Prisha's new office at the Global Dispatch, where she now served as executive editor for investigative journalism. The walls were still bare except for her framed Veritas Award and a photograph of her with Professor Desai at the ceremony. Boxes of books and research materials sat unopened on the floor. She'd been too busy with her first major project to properly settle in. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Farhan entered carrying 2 cups of chai and a folder tucked under his arm. "Progress report as requested, boss," he said with a grin, setting a cup on her desk. "The corporate whistleblower piece is ready for final review." Over the past year, their professional partnership had evolved into something deeper. After the award ceremony, they had collaborated on an international investigation that took them across 3 continents. Somewhere between late-night strategy sessions in hotel lobbies and tense confrontations with corporate lawyers, the careful boundaries between them had dissolved. "Stop calling me boss," she laughed. "We're co-directors of the investigative unit." "You outrank me by exactly 1 fancy title and we both know it," he replied, dropping into the chair across from her desk. "But I'll settle for partner." The word carried weight beyond their professional relationship, and they both knew it. 6 months ago, after a particularly grueling week tracking financial documents through offshore accounts, they had finally acknowledged what had been building between them for years. Their relationship had progressed with the same careful attention to detail that characterized their journalism. Thoughtful, deliberate, and surprisingly deep. "The whistleblower piece looks solid," Prisha said, scanning the documents. "Though the minister will certainly deny everything." "Let him," Farhan replied. "We have the evidence and 3 corroborating sources. That's why they hired us, to publish the stories others can't or won't." Their move to the Global Dispatch had been unexpected. After her Veritas win, several major publications had courted Prisha. But it was the Dispatch's commitment to editorial independence and substantial investigative resources that had won her over. The fact that they also wanted Farhan's documentary expertise as part of the package had made the decision easier. "Did you see this?" Farhan asked, sliding his tablet across the desk. On screen was a news item about Malhotra Digital's financial troubles following a failed launch and a defamation lawsuit from Greencore Industries. "Vikram pushed that story without sufficient evidence," Prisha said, shaking her head. "Now his reputation's damaged and his father's cutting funding." "You could have been caught in that mess," Farhan observed, "if you'd taken his offer." Prisha nodded, thinking about the paths not taken. "Professor Desai always said choosing the right story to pursue is as important as how you tell it." Speaking of the professor, she was scheduled to visit next week to help launch their mentorship program for young journalists, Prisha's personal project. 20 students would receive training and support to develop investigative skills, with special focus on those from backgrounds underrepresented in journalism. "Remember how you looked at the awards ceremony when they called your name?" Farhan asked suddenly. "Not proud or excited, but peaceful, like you'd finally found your place in the world." "I think I had," Prisha replied thoughtfully. though not in the way I'd imagined as a student. Her phone chimed with a message from Professor Desai. Amrita Roy from the mentorship program just published her first investigative piece on housing discrimination. Reminds me of someone I know. You're creating ripples, Sharma. Prisha smiled, forwarding the message to Farhan. This was perhaps the most unexpected joy of her journey, watching others find their voices through the doors she helped open. Later that evening, they walked along the riverfront near their apartment, discussing plans for their upcoming investigation into pharmaceutical pricing. 5 years ago, I thought success meant being seen, Prisha reflected, watching boats drift by in the twilight, being noticed by people like Vikram, being pulled from the shadows into some spotlight. And now? Farhan asked, his hand warm around hers. Now I understand it's about seeing clearly, not being seen, she replied. Finding stories that matter and telling them honestly. The work speaks for itself. They paused at a bench overlooking the water, the city lights beginning to glimmer against the darkening sky. Though I must admit, she added with a smile, it doesn't hurt to be seen by the right people. Like award committees? Farhan teased. Like Professor Desai? She corrected him. Like the students in our program. Like the sources who trust us with their stories. She squeezed his hand. Like you. I saw you before anyone else did, Farhan said quietly. Not because you were becoming famous or winning awards, but because you were extraordinary in the ways that actually matter. Your integrity, your persistence, your compassion for the people in your stories. As they continued their walk, discussing story angles and interview strategies with the easy familiarity of people who shared both purpose and heart, Prisha reflected on the strange journey from invisibility to recognition. The girl who had once been deemed too ordinary had never actually changed her essence. She had simply stopped measuring her worth through others' perception and started trusting her own voice. The real revolution hadn't been in becoming someone new, but in finally recognizing the value of who she had been all along.